Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, hello. Oh boy, I got a real fun interview for you. Apparently, I am a quote-unquote millennial, in a quote, at 32 3/4 years old. And I always kind of had a little bit of a beef about what I read and heard about us so-called millennials and what we are and are not. And I wondered, is that all real or new, or someone's just trying to make some stuff up? Well, this guest here, Lee Caraher, she sets us straight, and it's so handy. So you're going to learn a few key things that were eye-openers for me, including one, just what exactly defines a millennial in terms of the age and year cutoffs, and why is it that 72% of us reject that label? Secondly, what is actually different about millennials versus what is just your typical intergenerational bashing that's been going on since the days of Plato? And three, how do we coordinate well to work nicely and cooperatively and optimally cross-generationally? So if you want to check out the show notes, the transcript, the things mentioned here in this episode, you're going to find that over at awesomeatyourjob.com. And if you want just the takeaways faster while you're over at awesomeatyourjob.com, sign up for the Gold Nugget email list. So here is a bit about Lee. Lee Caraher started her company, Double Forte, in 2002 to work with good people doing great work for good companies. Her friends and colleagues have called her, quote, the Millennial Whisperer. After struggling with how to work well with millennial clients and now staffers, of which are more than half of her staff right now, and then working to figure out how to make that work, Lee has written a positive and practical book about the topic called Millennials Management, the essential guide to making it work at work. She has served as the Vice President of Corporate and Consumer Communications at the $1.6 billion Sega of America as their youngest U.S. Vice President. She has also served as Executive Vice President of the Weber Group and founder and president of Red Whistle Communications, both interpublic companies. Lee is active in the community and currently serves on numerous boards, a graduate of Carleton College with a degree in medieval history, which she finds useful every day. Lee lives on the peninsula with her husband, 2 sons, and their blind cat, Al, not AI, as I soon learned. So here's Lee. Lee, thanks so much for appearing here on the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Pete, it is awesome to be with you. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Well, I think we're going to have so much fun here. But first of all, I'm curious to know, you have a blind cat named AI. What's the backstory there?
Actually, his name is Al.
I was foiled by the capital I, lowercase l.
Sorry, it's Al. His name is Al. He's named after his name is actually Altoona. Which
classy.
My husband insists on spelling it like tuna the fish, but actually he's named after Altoona, Wisconsin, where my parents lived. Every summer, my whole family would go for the whole time. So that's who Al is, and he's blind, and so my husband calls him Stevie Wonder. You know.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just to be totally politically incorrect.
Well, I assume that means Al is very talented. That's where I was going with that.
Yes, very talented.
He reminds me of another blind person who's very talented.
He sings in his sleep, absolutely.
Now, you are known as the Millennial Whisperer.
Yes, my friends call me that.
Which is good. So that wasn't something that you and your branding communication wisdom dreamt up.
No, intensely dislike that. I'd rather be called the Millennial Champion.
Okay.
But my friends actually started calling me Millennial Whisperer a few years ago. I failed epically at working with millennials, and then I worked at it to figure out what the heck to do. And then my friends started calling me and saying, what does this mean? What does that mean? And I would say, this is what I think. Go ask them. Oh, you're the Millennial Whisperer, Lee. So then it sort of stuck. It just stuck.
Well, I think you teased up a little story, and I can't help but dig into it. Can you share with us, how did things crash and burn? You started working with millennials, and what were the challenges, the problems that you saw?
So when I started my company in 2002, we only hired people with 10 years of experience, which almost by definition are probably 31, 32 years old at the minimum. Mm-hmm. In 2008, when everything crashed around us, it's always good to look at your business model during an economic blip of any sort to make sure, because usually a business model that got you to a certain point where the economy, your economy, the big economy, the regional economy changes, will not be the one that you should take forward. And we decided to hire young people, people who were right out of college, which I had done in my past, but I had not done in this company. So we did, and I was terrible at it. And I had been known before for recruiting and retaining people, but I started recruiting and hiring people, 22, 23, 24-year-olds. And I hired 6 within a couple of months of each other, and within 3 months, they were all gone.
Oh,
and
wow.
one of them could be their problem, but 6 of them had to be my problem. So I never had 100% failure in recruiting ever. And I started looking into it, and I found that there was such a thing called millennial. I had no idea. This group of people has a different point of view than I had, and how my company was operating, since we only had people who were Gen Xers or Boomers. So we did some shifting around, and based on the research I did, the interviews I did, we did some shifting around, and then my book came out of that, just trying to be helpful to the other people who were struggling with it.
Fascinating. So this tells me from your real live lived experience says that there's something to it, that these so-called millennials really are, I guess, I give them the both, I suppose, 32 3/4. We really are different than previous workers. And in what ways is that actually true?
So, I think, first of all, millennials get such a bad rap. So millennials this year are between 16 and 36 years old.
Okay.
So they're born, I use Pew Research as my base on this. So born between 1980 and 2000, which is a huge range, it's a huge range. So they get a huge bad rap. And particularly the middle group, 22 to 28, 29 years olds, really get the worst rap right now. And it's just statistically impossible that an entire generation is terrible,
Oh, yeah.
It's just terrible. This has happened. But there are very many differences. So I would say to you a few things. One, I split the group of millennials into 3 groups. The first group is probably 29 to 36 this year and came into the workplace after 9/11, between 9/11 and 2000, end of 2008. They came into the workplace. And for instance, their point of view in general on security and privacy is very different from Gen Xers or Boomers, because they came into the workplace right after 9/11 when things were, really got tightened down, which became normal. So Boomers and Xers had to get used to it. Millennials who were that old, that was just normal. You didn't have to learn something new. It's just what happened, right? The next group is 22, 23 to 28, 29. And this group came into the workplace after end of 2008, 2009, when the economy contracted dramatically. It's also the largest group of millennials in terms of millions of people. There are still millennials in that age group who are looking for work commensurate with their education because there just wasn't work.
Yeah.
And this group is the one that gets the biggest rap, mostly because of what was happening for Boomers and Xers at the same time as millennials were basically emptying out of college in tsunamis, right? And then the youngest group is 16 to 22 in school, and they have the advantage and disadvantage of many things that the oldest group did not have. So, for instance, the iPad did not exist when the oldest millennial was in school. And today, iPads are in classrooms and almost on a one-to-one basis all over this country. The other thing that's true is that one-to-one computers was not a requirement for most schools for this older set of millennials, and now is almost a requirement for almost all higher education situations. So when you have this technology in front of you in your classroom, a lot of things are afforded to you that change the way you learn. So for instance, kids, I don't mean to call them kids, but 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they're doing homework in the classroom and they're learning on videos at nights. Khan Academy has totally changed how people learn at the high school and college level, actually. So these differences show up in the workplace in many different kinds of ways. One example is often when people when recent graduates come from college, often they have to be trained backwards in technology because they may have used Gmail base for their entire lives. And then they get into the workplace, which may have a legacy system. More work is on Outlook than is on Gmail. And it's not native for them. So in my company, we're Outlook based. My company is almost 14 years old. We have to train recent graduates backwards on Outlook. Oh. And they feel like it's backwards. It's like, oh my God, it's so antiquated. Because how it works is different than how a Gmail system works. So just those kinds of things that boomers and Xers would never have thought of, right? Another thing that is often true is, so I could ask a person, 22, 23, 24-year-old, I would say, send me a draft of something, and they will send me a Google link.
Really?
This will drive me crazy. They send me a Google link.
Is it because it's a Google Doc that they've made?
It's a Google Doc, right? They send me a Google Doc.
Uh-huh.
It's full of all the comments and the corrections on the site.
Huh.
This is normal. Group sourcing, crowdsourcing information, documents. This is how people are learning how to work with each other in school. Well, this is not necessarily how a lot of work works outside of school. And it's not that they're wrong. They sent me a draft. Uh-huh. Their concept of a draft, my concept of a draft, is actually a piece of paper printed out on my desk. So all these clashes of definition, I think, are what have created a negative impression from older people about millennials. And I really intensely dislike that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess what you're describing, I think it is resonating a bit. Like once I was in an elementary school because we had a business associated with low-cost online math tutoring. And so we were kind of checking it out.
There you go.
And so we're checking out the scene, ground level. And one of the teachers said to these children, hey, what do you do if you need help or I'm busy helping another student? And all the children said in unison, Khan Academy. That's like, yeah. I was like, whoa. Like that is just their default thing they do with their learning downtime is get up on the Khan Academy. That was an eye-opener for me.
Absolutely.
And so, but you're saying, yes, of course, Beast, that's how it is everywhere.
Well, I've met Sal Khan, and he's an amazing person, right? Mm-hmm. And his point of view, here, finally, how can you teach? He started teaching math to his nephew, mm-hmm. but it's an amazing resource. It's different in terms of just how you would go. A lot of parents have a hard time with the fact that their kids are watching videos at night and doing their homework in the classroom. Like, what? This is upside down. Well, yeah, but it's working, right? So we just have a different point of view on how things. I can tell you the millennials in my office, the younger millennials in my office, they'll go look for a YouTube video before they ask how to do something.
Right.
And it might be faster if they just asked how to do something, but that's their go-to. That's their default.
What's encouraging or heartening or edifying, synonyms here, is that it's not like they're lazy, they're entitled,
Absolutely
they
not.
think everybody gets a trophy. But it's just like they have some different habits, associations, comfortable grooves associated with different technologies.
Yeah. I think digital native is really the term. And just so comfortable with technology. Just, to the extent, there will be a time when a baby comes out of the womb with an iPhone attached to their end of their arm. It's going to happen. We're going to be there. And I don't think millennials I think they get a bad rap. Like, I don't think they're entitled. I think they've been conditioned. I think, and when I say conditioned, I mean two things. One is the average grade point average in the last 15 years. So when the oldest millennial was 15 years, so 21, has risen in this country over a full point in the last 15 years. So, a 3.5, you can actually get a 5.0 on a 4.0 average now with extra credit and all that kind of stuff. Well, that is creating a false expectation for the value of that work. And there's a lot of data on this topic and a lot of, at the university level, with the cost of college going up so much, sort of the value of the grade, there's a lot of pressure from parents and students on teachers and graduate students who are doing grading to just, instead of the B minus, give the B plus. Instead of the B plus, give the A minus. And over the last 15 years, the whole grade point average has risen a full point. So when you get into the workplace, your B plus work, you're used to getting an A for it. And a lot of managers have to send it back. And it's not quite done yet. We're almost done. What do you mean it's perfect? And there's a big dissonance that happens right out of school based on that grade point average. And there's all these things that Xers and boomers say they should know, they're supposed to know. And the should and the supposed to, as soon as you find yourself saying those words, you know you're in trouble. Because they don't. And it's not their fault. So, in your email to me, you asked for some hard facts. Well, that is a fact.
Take it.
Average has risen a full point in 15 years.
And quick clarifier on that, if I may. So the grade point averages have risen. You're saying this is due to grade inflation, and I just gotta do my diligence here. This is not because we've actually all just gotten smarter.
No.
Like how the ACT or SAT standardized test scores have been about the same. Down. Oh.
Down.
Mercy. That's not good. You're learning me here. You're learning me good.
So the SAT has gone through 2 or 3 iterations in that period of time as well. Cal Berkeley now publishes the grade point, the curve on every grade that you get in a transcript. The only reason you have to do that is, and you can only get a 4.0. 4.0 is the highest you can get at Cal Berkeley.
Right.
One of the premier institutions in this country. The only reason you would possibly want to do that is if your 4.0 had to be justified.
Yeah.
And they were finding that some of their kids were getting X'd out because they didn't have 4.5. So, they weren't allowed to get a 4.5 because 4.0 was the top. Harvard and Stanford have done, a lot of work in this area too, bringing it back down, bringing it more realistic. The average grade given at Harvard University, the most common grade, not the average grade, the most common grade given at Harvard University is an A-. Well, how is it statistically possible that everybody's above average, even on a curve is a curve, right?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of inflation that goes on that when you get into the workplace, it's always been challenging being the first 4 years out of college.
Right. Learning
how to be in the real world where social promotion is not the norm has always been challenging because everyone starts at the same time and maybe you don't elevate at the same time. But add on to it this great inflation, which has created the impression that my work is better than it actually is, has made it even harder. And as I believe has created this impression that the boomers and Xers have about their millennial colleagues, about how entitled they are and how they think their work is so fabulous. Well, because we told them it was. We gave them an A- instead of a B-. We gave them, if a full point is a full point, think about that. B- to A-, that's a huge difference.
Oh, that's good.
So there's a lot going on. And then I think on what you said about everybody gets a trophy, the rise of nobody loses soccer is like the biggest disservice, I think, to the human race.
All right. Bold words.
It's wonderful for preschool to second graders. But really, the kids always know. My kids played soccer. Nobody wins soccer. And nobody loses soccer. They always knew the score. But the parents were the ones, we don't keep score, The problem is you keep going. It keeps happening. And there are a lot of awards and medals and stickers and stuff that people get just for showing up. That for participation awards that are meant to, I think our parents really like. The kids don't like them as much, is my experience. And then I'm here on time. You hear this a lot with, why don't I get any credit for being on time? Because you're supposed to be on time.
Yeah.
And that's not the millennials' fault. That's their parents' fault.
Oh, this is...
Strong feelings about that. Can you tell?
I hear you. Well, no, Lee, I really appreciate it because I think you just made it real for me because I hear a lot of noise about the millennials. And I was like, what does that even mean? And am I one of them? And what am I supposed to, what's the implication of that? And so I love it. You've just broken it down. I was like, okay, well, check it out. We have some different perspectives and experiences and habits and norms when it comes to the technology that we use. Okay, got it. Also, there's been a little bit of messaging that's all over the place that you're amazing when in fact you're maybe a 1 grade level below amazing. Hey, you're good. You're not amazing, but you've been told you're amazing. And so you kind of are surprised when you're kind of getting that feedback. What are some other real differences? And the more you've got hard facts, the more I love it.
Well, first let's talk, let's just define a millennial. So like I said, it's 1980 to 2000. This is the largest generation, 80 million people. Boomers, which is 64 is the youngest one, which is me. This year are 52 to 70 years old. 78 million boomers. And in the middle is the Gen Xers, about 46 million Gen Xers. So there really is a difference in the size of that middle generation, Gen Xers. Gen Xers are full of single children who are latchkey kids who were raised by dual income families and went home by themselves and let themselves live. Very independent, a lot of single children. Millennials, there are more siblings in the millennial generation than there are in the Gen X generation. The other thing that's interesting about millennials is it's the most educated generation so far, and it hasn't even finished, right? Hasn't even finished, and more by sheer number, but by percentage, more millennials have at least a bachelor's of arts degree or a bachelor of science degree, the equivalent of a bachelor's degree, than by percentage than either boomers or Xers or traditionals, which is the 70-plus group. The other thing that is interesting about this group, it's 29% of employed millennials live at home, which is the highest percentage in over 4 decades. And 36% of millennials live at home, but 29% of working millennials live at home. And it's also the least white, least Caucasian generation that we have in this country. Right now, there are fewer Caucasian millennials than there are all the other races combined, which will then in the whole country mean that in about 6 or 7 years, we'll tip over so that 50% of the United States will be not Caucasian.
Oh, interesting.
So, there's a lot going on in all those numbers, right? But it leads to a lot of confusion and us versus them. And us versus them is nothing new, right? Intergenerational conflict is, we talk about it as if it's never happened before. How crazy is that? I start my book with a quote from Socrates, 400
I loved
BC,
it. Yes.
Before Christ. I mean, it's a long time, right? And I have a degree of medieval history. That's 1,000 years of intergenerational conflict right there. So intergenerational conflict is not new. It's just we're dealing with it. And the other piece of that is this is the first time in American history where we've had 4 different generations in the workplace at the same time. So if you think about, it used to be that we were very hierarchical. The boomers were a wait my turn generation. So many of us, I'm a boomer, like I said, for so many of us, we just knew if we just waited our time, our opportunity would come. Well, that is not how millennials want to live their lives, right? Technology has created a very flat world where you're one click away, one tweet away, one email away from anybody and any information. And why shouldn't that be true? Access shouldn't be true in the workplace. So where we have today is I sit next to a millennial, and behind him is an Xer, and behind her is another boomer, but next to her is another young millennial, where maybe 15 years ago, we would have been on different floors. We might have been in different offices. You wouldn't have seen a millennial in an office. Now, boomers don't even take offices in huge swaths of this country. Boomers don't take offices. They're out in the pit, as we used to call it. So a lot of norms have changed so that we're just much more up against it than we used to be.
Well, thank you. That
hopefully that helps.
No, I appreciate it. Well, and it makes it all the more real, and it's like you're setting me straight, which is nice because this has happened before. Like I've gotten sucked into like an hour plus of online reading about generational stuff, and I'm just thinking, I don't know if I really buy if any of that is for real. And so I love how you bring in the research and the experience to kind of separate myth from fact. So now let's talk a little bit about some myths. What are some things people say about those millennials that strike you as just rubbish and that need to be rejected?
I think the entitled thing is totally BS. Like I said, they're not. An entire generation can't be entitled.
Right.
Statistically impossible. It's how they grew up. It's conditioning. I think the other myth that comes up a lot is expect rewards and promotions just for showing up. And I think that is more true. And we can break that expectation really early on if we're just direct.
Right.
Another myth that comes up all the time is the millennials are lazy and they don't work hard. And I think that's total BS. I think that millennials work very differently than their older colleagues. And we need to understand that. And I'll give an example of that. I was walking a hall with a client who a little older than myself, and he's, I walked by this person, and this person had 3 or 4 screens up, a phone, an iPad, and 2 computer screens. Had Facebook up, Twitter, his email, and his phone was in his hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, that guy, look how he's just totally not doing anything. And I look over, and what I see is he's talking to one of my people back in my office on Facebook, because they had sent something in the Facebook message chat because it was Facebook native, was dealing with something on Twitter from that was feedback to the company, had been texted by a reporter, so was texting back the reporter and had his email up. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's doing 4 things at the same time.
Yeah.
No, he's got his Facebook up. No. He's working in Facebook. And so the number one, sort of the mode of communication is very foreign to many older people. And the other piece of that is boomers and Xers for the last 20 years have had the business narrative of work-life balance, as if you start one and when you end it, you start the next. And millennials, given this technology and the 24/7 nature of technology, are much more fluid, sort of going in and out of life and work all day long. And they expect it to go back and forth, which is really how we all today need to work. And that expectation of, well, I'm going to get that done later, it doesn't mean that they're not going to get their work done. It just may not be at the time that you want it done. So having some expectations around when you get work done, you can solve all those problems really quickly with communication. Another myth is that they're casual and disrespectful or rude. And I think what is definitely true is that something like only 20% of the people who took 20% of the numbers of people who took cotillion classes or manners classes take them today. I mean, I grew up and I had to go learn how to cut butter by cutting bananas and putting in my bread plate. Well, most people do not take those classes anymore. And in a world where, particularly in big metropolitan areas where people come from all over the country and all over the world with different social norms, it is not unusual to hear someone that person's so rude, they're wearing their baseball cap in the restaurant. Well, no one ever told them not to. It's not like they're. I think a good example here is I used to interview people when I was recruiting them. I would take them out to lunch or dinner. Someone would do that and just get to know each other. And I did not hire 2 people because they could not eat.
Like
and that
properly.
was dumb. Yeah, properly. How stupid was I? So stupid. I mean, I can teach someone to eat. I mean, it's not that hard. If you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
But I can teach someone to eat. I can't teach someone to have initiative and be curious, but I can teach someone to eat. I'm still kicking myself in the shins that I didn't hire those 2 people. And this was years ago. So I'm on the board of a college in my area, and now I'm giving etiquette classes to these college seniors, and they don't know. They don't know not to hang their knife and fork off their plate. It's not because they're ignorant in the bad sense. It's because they just aren't aware. And if we can just say they aren't aware instead of they're ignorant, we sort of get rid of that whole thing. Every time you say should or supposed to, you get yourself in trouble. I think that the last myth that I really found a lot is that millennials don't want to pay their dues, and they want freedom, flexibility, and work-life balance day one. And I think that's twofold. One, I think the millennials have no problem paying their dues. They want to know what the dues are, and they want to understand what the dues get you, right? So the context is really important. And it's not rocket science to figure out. Of course, they want work-life balance because their parents have been talking about it for 20 years. And so, of course, they should have it because their parents have been working really hard for it. I find that the working women who are older have the hardest time with this one because really working women who are 55 or older are the ones who put this on the map, work-life balance. I just, I'm not very popular when I say this, but I say you got to get over it. The point of being a pioneer is to make it better for the people behind you. Difference is they're sitting right with us, right? There's no time between us.
Right.
So I think that's a split myth.
That is a nice reframe there. But
both of the negative ones are wrong. Anyway.
Well, that's handy. So understanding, established. We got what's true, what's myth, where's their hard data. That's good. So So then where does that leave us in terms of some prescriptive advice, some do's or don'ts? What are some of the top things that millennials should do to, you might say, quote unquote, fix, what is wrong or perceived to be wrong, as well as kind of build off some strength to really dazzle?
I think a couple of things. One, millennials will show up in the workplace and you will see inefficiency everywhere that you can fix. You will. Day one, you're going to see something you can fix. My recommendation to you is try not to fix it day one.
Okay.
Because you're going to get a lot of people pushing back on you. So do it their way first. And then then after you've done it their way at least once, so you understand the interdependencies of everything, then you can go and say, I think I may have found a way to streamline this. Can I show it to you? What do you think? Because if you just go in and say, oh, that's stupid, I could have done that, you could cut off an hour here because you probably can, right? All you're going to do is get everyone else's backs up. Because what? You just showed up and now you're going to tell us we're wrong? That's just disrespectful. And I don't think people mean it as disrespectful, but that is how it's taken. So if you just do it their way first and then try to show them how to improve, either by streamlining it or by shortcutting it or whatever, after you've done it and after you've been there for at least a couple of weeks, and I know I sound so dumb, but this is happening all over the country. I get this question all the time. Someone was in my office on hour 3 saying, how dumb our process was.
Oh.
So, just do it their way first. The other piece is one of the first questions that a lot of millennials ask is, who's going to be my mentor?
Okay.
And I'm a huge proponent of this and mutual mentorship. And if you are going to have a mentor in your company or your manager, the first thing I'd like millennials to do is ask the person, what do they read every day? Because you get your news from different sources than they do. And if you can just read their news sources just for a month, you will have a much different appreciation for how they learn and what their frame of reference is. And if you could exchange your reading list, give it to them, here's what I'm reading every day, that's even better, because then they're having a sense of what you read every day. But going in and asking for their frame of reference, if you have a boomer boss who you think might be a little bitter, they're already going to have a bad, if you think they're already going to have a bad point of view on millennials, then, you can get rid of it by just saying, what can I learn from you? Looking forward to being with you, looking forward to learning from you, and doing something their way first and learning from them. And then going back and saying, hey, Lee, I had some thoughts on this. I wonder if I can walk you through how we might improve this process so that you've learned their way and you've learned some from them first. Those two things alone will get you off on such a better path and sort of break through a myth, a negative impression that you might be walking into. And the other piece of that is too, 72% of millennials don't call themselves millennials, right? It's so negative that millennials don't like it. And in the end, the word millennial just tells you when you were born. It just tells you were born between 1980 and 2000. But it's so laden with negative impression and negative connotation that even the generation themselves, you never hear a Gen X or a Boomer disavowing their generation title. But millennials do it all the time.
Oh, well, that's reassuring because I'm just like, I don't think I am one of those. I emailed that to you in advance with the questions. Right. And so I guess
technically you are, but it doesn't need to be negative, right? It doesn't need to be negative.
Well, so this is great stuff. And could you maybe share a story or example to bring some of this to life here? I think that those are some great practices in terms of swapping the reading lists and more. Can you show me how you've seen perhaps a transformation of understanding unfold during the course of your working and writing and speaking?
I can tell you from ourselves when we had failed so miserably, I went and I interviewed as many millennials as I could find about what the hell did we do wrong. And basically they laughed in my face, oh my God, you did what? And these are things I've done for my whole career that have been successful, right? And that's where I really came up with the should and supposed to's. And one thing that we did that changed everything, well, two things, I'll give you two things. One was, the first thing we did was we provide now context for everything at the beginning of a project. Context. So what is this project? Who is working on this project? What roles does everybody have on the project, and who's dependent on whoever else? And when the team gets done with the project, where does that go, and what impact will it have on the whole company? And we go all the way, it sounds like, duh, wouldn't you do that anyway? But most people do not stop to start in a full context. They just assume people understand. So we started doing, here's the project, here's everybody on the project, all those things I just discussed, so that everybody knows that everybody matters. And particularly for lower level employees, when I mean that, I mean early entry employees who may be frustrated with the fact that they're a low man on the totem pole and think this work is stupid. Why does it even work? I'm here to tell you that there's no job in this country that is hired for that doesn't have to get done. Mm-hmm. If you're hired, the job has to get done. So your job matters, no matter how stupid you think it is. And once you understand who's relying on you to get your job done, that just improves performance dramatically. Mm-hmm. Number one. Number two, understanding how we all interact together and how you might help. Millennials, I find, are a huge helping generation. A lot of people say they're the me generation. My experience is that the we generation, and how you give feedback to a millennial in terms of if they fall down on the job, if they don't do a good job. The fastest way I know to make that never happen again is to say, hey, Pete, you really didn't do a great job. And, the impact was that you really let the team down. Mm. And the rest of the team had to pull your weight. And I will never have to say that to you again, Pete, because the team is so important. Millennials are very team-oriented. They're very leadership-oriented. Leadership is very fluid to them. They could lead from any place in the boat. They don't have to be the coxswain to lead, right? And it's bone-crushing when they realize they've let the team down.
I hear
It doesn't work so well with Xers. Xers are, more independent. But millennials, that really snapped over for me when I said to somebody, you're really not living up to your potential. I mean, you have such great potential. And this woman, I don't really care what you think, Lee. Really? And I was like, wow, I've never had someone work for me who didn't care what I thought. Wow. And so I think she was an extreme example. And I said, but you let everybody down. Look at this. They're all working their butts off because you let them down. She burst into tears.
Oh, man.
She went from, I don't care what you think, Lee, to bursting into tears. When I flipped the context of what I was talking about, my opinion about her work, to the impact of her work on everybody else. If you had told me earlier in my career that I was living up to my potential, I would have burst into tears, right? So, and I think those are generalizations that I have seen. I mean, I don't know how to quantify that, but I can tell you that I challenge everybody to try that and see if it doesn't work for them.
Oh, that's powerful. Thank you.
And we started doing those two things. And I tell you, we track our time in my company. And so when we started doing those two things, making sure we were giving feedback so that people understood that their impact on everybody else, and then contextualizing everything. Here's why we're doing it. Here's who's who, and all that kind of stuff. We found that we were wasting at least per person 1 or 2 hours less per week because there weren't as many questions. There wasn't much grinding going on. I'm like, what am I doing this for? And although it takes time at the beginning of a project to do this, it saves time in the end.
And how did you measure the wasted time?
So we track our time. We have to track time. That is, we bill our clients and then unbillable time.
Okay.
And our unbillable time went down once we made this a practice.
Oh, that's great. Lovely. Okay. Well, any other things you want to make sure you articulate before we shift gears into the fast faves?
Sure. I think, I'm really optimistic about the world because of millennials. So this generation is going to crack a lot of nuts that we've been toiling on or avoiding or kicking the can down the field. And if we can just appreciate that they have a lot to offer, I think boomers, who are often bitter about the fact that they're still working, will be much more able to accept and allow them to thrive.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, could you start us off by sharing a favorite quote, something that you found inspiring?
I find I'm a big quote person, and my Twitter feed's full of quotes. Right now, because I have something going on, "Focus is my friend" is my favorite quote right this second.
Agreed.
Keeps me going.
And how about a favorite book?
My favorite book, I have many favorite books, frankly. I read a lot. I think leaders read a lot. One of the seminal books is Primal Leadership, which is just fantastic in terms of understanding your style of leadership and when to deploy different ways.
Oh, thank you. And how about a favorite tool, whether it's hardware, software, gadget that helps you be productive?
I really like the app Focus at Will, which has science, music you choose based on science to help you focus on one thing at a time.
Oh, excellent. And how about a favorite habit or personal practice of yours that's boosted your effectiveness?
Move every day. Move every day.
Just like walking or just any kind of...
Walking, sort of move. I have a movable desk, goes up and down. I'm sort of moving. If I find that if I'm sitting too much, my brain goes to mush. But when I'm moving around, my brain is active and I can be much more productive.
Excellent. And how about a sort of a favorite nugget, something that you share and that gets retweeted or Kindle book highlighted or folks really nodding and resonating with what you're communicating?
The we generation thing really gets a lot of traction.
Because it rhymes.
When you let the team down, that really resonates strong with almost everybody I talk to.
Oh, thank you. And how about the best way to find you? If folks want to learn more, would you point them to your website or Twitter, or where should they go?
Sure. The best thing to do is go to my website, which is leecaraher.com. Or on Twitter, I'm at Lee Caraher, and I share a lot of the stuff and other good leadership stuff there all the time. I'm a little prolific.
Oh, I like that. Thank you. And how about a favorite challenge or parting call to action that you'd like to leave folks with who are seeking to become more awesome at their jobs?
I think the biggest challenge is to not be negative. Just don't take the negative energy. Take the positive out of the negative situation. And if we can do that, be the duck. Let it roll off your back and then move forward. Beautiful.
Well, Lee, thanks so much. This has been a real treat, and I wish you tons of luck in all your pursuits here.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's been great to talk with you.
Oh, fun. Well, I hope that was as eye-opening for you as it was for me. And whatever side of things you find yourself on, you are the millennial or managing the millennial. I hope there's some really handy takeaways there in terms of what's real, what's not, and how we can all just get along. So again, if you want to check out the show notes, the transcript, the links and things mentioned, that's over at awesomeatyourjob.com. And I hope to catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. To get the most out of this conversation, visit awesomeatyourjob.com to find today's show notes, transcript, and infographic summary cheat sheet. For more entertaining professional skill sharpening, be sure to subscribe to catch the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.